Welcome to the Road to Harmony Forum hosted by Korean Society of Queensland and also the Overseas Korean Foundation. My name is Hae-young Kim and I'm the President of Korean Society of Queensland. I thank you for your time and attendance today. Before I introduce an invited guest and open tonight's forum, I'd like to make a few short opening remarks. Tonight's forum has been created in response to many unfortunate and upsetting Asian hate crimes or multicultural crimes that have been coming to public attention over the past year. These events felt too close to home and many have felt angry or unwelcoming in our city. We hope tonight we can regain a sense of community and find ways to protect and educate each other. But above all, we hope tonight can give us the confidence to educate those around us, to not add to the anger and divide, but to bridge it. To help us all, we have asked for well-informed and pivotal figures in our community to inform us about those crimes involving people from our multicultural society community in Australia. First, we have Inspector Nari Willen from Mount Gravatt Police Office Station, along with Chung Hoon Bae, Police Liaison Officer with Queensland Police. Second, we have Samuel Hwang from TWC Lawyers. The third, we have Elijah Bill, who is Deputy Chairperson of ECCQ, Ethnic Communities Council of Queensland. The Korean Society is familiar with speakers and they are very involved in our community, have helped families, individuals and groups countless times with sensitive matters. I also appreciate Seung-Yeol Lee and Hyun-Young Oh from the Consulate General Office in Sydney attending the forum via our live streaming. In addition, we have Jae Song, Director of the Korean Studies Research Hub at the University of Melbourne, who is also watching this tonight. Is Peter Zhang here? Not yet? Thanks Peter Zhang from Sunnybank Hills Rotary Club, joining with attendees from Chinese community. Who is from Chinese community? Thank you for coming. And Emily Kim from MP James Martin's office. And Taegon Kim from the Consulate office here in Brisbane because we are opening the office. I also, thanks for everyone who is attending tonight's forum and via online streaming. I'm looking forward to our forum tonight, so I won't take any more of our precious forum time. Once again, thanks for attending tonight, both here and online. Please make sure to ask questions and engage with our speakers in our Q&A session. I now hand over to our guest speakers or our MC Johnny Sin.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Johnny Shin, and I'm one of the directors at Korean Society of Queensland. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving a good opening speech. I do apologise, I didn't mean to come in a little early and prepared, but traffic always out on Friday. Seems like everyone will go to Gold Coast and have some fun from Brisbane City. It is quite a obviously heavy topic, but at the same time, we do want to keep it informative as much as possible with everyone. So I do appreciate you making the time to get here. This particular event, as Hae-young alluded to, is probably more supported by also the Overseas Korean Foundation, but not just that. I think all of us as a multicultural people who's been living here for a very long period of time, I think it's extremely important to bring awareness of what could potentially go wrong. I do know that overseas, in some cases in Australia, for me also, personally, I've moved here when I was 15, 14 years old, when I was a high school student. And I grew up in Gold Coast, all the way to currently Brisbane. My state high school that I attended to was literally, I was one of the only few Asian person in the whole group of high school. And personally, have I experienced any hatreds from other local students of mine? If I say no, that's probably a lie. I think there's always one of us at one point in our life living here as a multicultural background people. We do come across those, I guess, every now and then, some of these comments that may hurt us, I guess, individually, but as also as a human being, sometimes those words may not seem so kindly and nice. But in saying that, Asian hate crime is something that obviously have become a big of an issue in the United States. And I think it is absolutely important for us to understand this locally here, to be aware of what could happen. And also I think we've got some fantastic guest speakers who made the time and effort to be here with us tonight. So I do look forward to hearing from them directly about what they've done from a more of a state government level as well, but also at the same time from a professional industry who also deals with criminal law in depth as well, and someone who's also representing the multicultural society from different background and understanding of that as well. So we're very excited at the same time, very keen to hear about the comments from our guest panels. So if I may, before we sort of begin to that, I think there's a couple of videos that we can potentially watch as well, which I think one of the video is actually in Korean for 2 minutes, so please do watch the scene of it, but I will translate that into English so we can all understand, or we can teach some Koreans here at any point in time. So if you want to learn some Korean, this Korean Society of Queensland is open for any people with multicultural background, including everyone. So thank you. If I can have if you can get your attention to the TV on your left-hand side for a minute or two, that would be much appreciated.
Between North and South Korea,
providing Kim Jong-un is well into boy bands.
At number 18, it's the biggest band you've never heard of. The biggest band you've never heard of.
You don't know that. I'm fully down with the kids.
This is BTS, the South Korean One Direction. The South Korean One Direction.
Yeah, never heard them. Yeah, never heard them.
When I first heard something Korean had exploded in America, I got worried. So I guess could have been worse. But not much worse.
And exploded they have. They're the first Korean act to have a #1 in America, which is made even more impressive because only one band member actually speaks English.
And I really started getting into this wormhole of their lyrics, and one of them was, "This meeting is like mathematical formula." I mean, that doesn't get girls across the line.
I have no idea what they're singing about, but these guys are great. Their choreo is great. The singing is possible.
God, I love these guys' totally gangster names. You got Rat Monster. God, I love these guys' totally gangster names. You got Rat Monster, J-Hope, V, Sugar, Jimin, Jin, and Jungkook.
There's 7 members. That is a lot. That is 2 hire cars. Surely you could fire 4 of them. That way you just have to hire a sedan and everyone have a nice little leg room. BTS have over 5 billion YouTube views and #1 hits in 73 countries.
They were the most tweeted about celebs for the last 2 years running, and they even spoke at the UN.
What about?
I'm going to say hair products.
We truly have the best fans in the world.
These fans are hardcore. I asked if any of them were gay, and just even asking that question upset these fans so much. I'm like, it's just math.
So I feel like BTS are a really big band. They're also the new old people barometer. Like if you've heard of them, you're young. If you're not, nah, retirement home. If you've heard of them, you're young. If you're not, nah, retirement home.
you. I think this one, the reason we've shown a bit of a background about a very popular boy band at the moment globally, BTS, is a well-known Korean pop band. Have anyone heard of BTS before? Yes? Yes, great, thank you. I think we, as a Korean pop culture and also a lot of multicultural cultures, become exposed far greatly than what it used to be 10 years ago or 20 years ago, ever than before, into mainstream media. And I think back at that, a lot of hatreds, as you probably saw, started to sort of arise in social media form as well. It's not just, I believe, the Asian hate crime or any hate crime against different multicultural background doesn't just stem from us sitting here and telling you bad word that you don't want to hear. I think social media presence has now expanded that horizon a little bit more than before. So for us, as an individual who come from a different background, sometimes we do watch out for and get hurt for those comments when we do allude to that. So I think BTS does have a big fan base across the world. They are probably the most multicultural band that exists in this world today that really brought harmony across various fan bases, whether you're from North America or Europe or Asia and Africa and other places parts of the world. So I think this really set the scene of the crime cannot just be limited to in person, but it can potentially extend to different forms of social media communication, which is sometimes very hard to see. But I guess we tend to get used to those things on a living day-to-day basis, and sometimes I do feel that my voice may not be heard as importantly as it should be oftentimes. So we decided to show that up a little bit, but there are just a couple of other videos that's a short period as well remaining. If we can watch the next one, which is a couple of cases against the hate crime. If I may have your attention to the TV for a couple more minutes, that would be much appreciated. This one is in Korean and I will translate afterwards.
여기 호주에서는 동양인을 향한 범죄가 끊이지 않고 있습니다. 이번엔 한 백인 여성이 베트남계 여성들에게 동양계라고 욕을 하며 침을 뱉고 발길질했습니다. 윤세민아 기자입니다.
호주의 대표적 관광도시 시드니입니다. 한낮 큰 길가에서 벌어진 일입니다. 회색 옷을 입은 백인 여성이 동양 여성 두 사람에게 쉴 새 없이 욕설을 퍼붓습니다. 얼굴에 침을 내뱉고 등 뒤에서 발길질도 합니다. 동양인이 코로나 바이러스를 가져왔다는 이유를 듭니다. 이 백인 여성은 17살 호주 현지인으로 베트남계 여성들을 폭행한 다음날 경찰에 체포됐다고 현지 언론이 보도했습니다. 폭행과 위협, 모욕적인 언어를 사용한 혐의로 재판에 넘겨졌습니다. 호주에선 최근 이 같은 동양인 혐오 범죄가 끊이지 않고 있습니다. 시드니에 있는 중국 영사관 앞에서 백인 남성이 중국인들을 향해 채찍을 휘두르는 일도 벌어졌습니다. 중국이 전 세계에 바이러스를 퍼뜨렸다며 중국 지도자를 죽이겠다는 협박도 했습니다. 앞서 JTBC는 호주 올버니 지역에서 한국인 남성이 현지 여성에게 폭행을 당했다는 내용도 보도했습니다. 코로나19를 옮기지 말라며 시비를 걸고 주먹으로 때린 사건으로 보도 이후 외교부는 호주 정부의 재발 방지를 요청했습니다. JTBC 윤세민입니다.
So this video was an incident in Australia where there was a couple, a group of friends of Vietnamese at the beginning walking down the road, and I think a lot of this stemmed from obviously COVID virus and how it all started. And as you've heard, I won't repeat that again, that there was some profanity that was issued, including violence from a young 17-year-old girl against innocent Vietnamese just walking down the road. There was some other incidents, as you saw down the track, and gentlemen with a whip in front of the Chinese embassy, claiming that the COVID has stemmed because of them, and there was a lot of unimaginable things that's been said there as well, which is certainly something that not just because we, there's a lot of things that we get is, I guess people do often say we look alike, and they do have an immediate possession that whether you're Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Singaporean or Malaysian or wherever you might come from. Unfortunately, it is a sad truth that that can occur despite the backgrounds of different people. It is unfortunate that this type of scene does get aired across Korea. There was other incidents locally in Queensland where a Korean person was beaten to death probably about 6 years ago, I think it was 7 years ago, in Jiban, just going past South Brisbane. Now, since then, Korean media, unfortunately, media likes to grab things that is quite interesting to the local people, and South Koreans have somehow developed this image that Australia is the most racist country, and a lot of them do ask, every time I go to South Korea, I talk to my friends, they're like, aren't you experiencing any racism in Australia? And it's sad that I can't say no straight up front. Majority of people that we all know are lovely people, but however, there are always one or few who tends to go extraordinary way to obviously hurt someone's feelings and bodily harm in some cases. So I just want to demonstrate that, and it is sad, but hopefully we can, with this forum, to move forward to a better path as we come towards and become more aware of these issues. Lastly, another quick video, if I may have another attention for last video on your left, that will be much appreciated. Thank you.
At a time of celebration and pride, Chinese Australians are being targeted. Discrimination relating to the coronavirus is fueling an increase in reports of abuse.
There's a sense of discomfort and concern, so I will put that up in the thousands.
Many of those reports are being shared online, with discrimination experienced in hospitals, schools and on public transport.
There's an example of a young person on a bus who felt very isolated and that basically no one would sit next to them. There's another example of a young woman who went to the doctors who was of Asian background, not Chinese, who basically the doctor's surgery was empty.
Now community groups are speaking out.
It is a virus, we call it coronavirus. It is not China virus. What we're going to do is isolate the virus, not Chinese.
Many are calling on greater support from governments.
All communities should be supported, and I think that's why I've sought to say to Australians that it is important to remain calm about this.
People should not be afraid and they should not discriminate. It is very important that people do not discriminate against our Chinese community.
I think in the main people are acting very responsibly and I ask them to continue.
Combating negative sentiments are Lunar New Year celebrations. Those that have continued are strengthening community support for Asian Australians.
I've never declared any feeling of racial discrimination against Chinese people.
We are very, very blessed to have such a strong Chinese community here in the city of Chatswood.
It's local people power warding off negativity at the start of the Lunar New Year. Lily Mayers, ABC News, Sydney.
Thank you. We saw Lee Duncan Pegg in there as well. Who's been a very strong supporter for multicultural society here in Sunnybank. Sorry, I do get a bit emotional because he's been a good friend of mine. But he's in this because of his hard work. I think this electorate grew up to be something that is quite rare in this south side area. Oh, I don't know what happened. Just seeing him just brought my memories. We do have a Chinese representative as well, Peter Zhang. It's really nice to have you here. I always enjoy his big parties that he throws at a nice restaurant very occasionally, and we appreciate your presence here too. Now, I think this kind of set the scene. We don't want to lead into more being too emotional about it. I guess that's just me as well. But at the same time, we want to show this to bring awareness of some of the media exposure we've had. And I think because of geopolitical tension between the countries also, in a political level, that sometimes often impact us directly as people who live here and as a citizen of Australia with a different background. But it was quite enlightening to see that again, to an extent that it is certainly a problem that should be all aware of. Now, before I invite our distinguished guest who will share about their personal experience and also what's been done in the background, we're really excited to hear about that. Now, one of the strongest, another advocate in the Korean society who've always led and who's always been an honorary member of the committee, Mr. Jin Sung Kim, has recorded, unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but he has recorded a short video of, I guess, of more of our opening talk. He's always been involved with the Korean Society. He's one of the biggest reasons why this building in this area and that we exist. So I'd like to quickly, lastly, I promise, before we go into the panel talk, just have your attention onto the for his opening remarks.
여러분 안녕하세요. 하나님은 모든 인간들이 서로 사랑하고 협력하며 살기를 바라십니다. 그래서 내 이웃을 내 몸과 같이 사랑하라 하고 말씀하셨습니다. 그러나 나보다 힘이 약하다고 무시하고 나와 민족이 다르다고 조롱하는 사람들이 어쩌다가 있습니다. 이런 문제로 인해 서로 미워하며 서로 싸움으로 치달아 불행한 사건들을 만드는 경우가 어쩌다 있습니다. 우리는 호주라는 다민족, 다문화와 다양한 생각을 가진 사람들이 아름답고 복된 발전하는 나라를 만들어 이 땅에 살아야 합니다. 혹시나 잘못된 생각을 가진 사람들이 있으면 깨우쳐주고 선도하여 불행한 사건들이 생기지 않도록 막아내야 합니다. 이번 퀸스랜드 한인회에서 아시아 혐오 범죄 대응 포럼을 통해 미워하지 않고 사랑하는 우리 사회를 만들자 하는 행사에 찬사를 보내며 호주 한인 총연합회장 명의로 축하를 드립니다. 감사합니다.
Can we have a big round of applause? I think, thank you. Mr. Joseph Kim has been one of the first generation of Korean who came to Queensland, migrated to Queensland at a very early days. I think almost 30, 40 years ago, we've set themselves in a successful business here. He employs, he operates a number of successful businesses and employs over 100 people, both in his hotel and wineries and across other business interests that he has. So we really value his opening remarks, and we're grateful for him taking the time to create that such a wonderful narrative, also in English, to translate them both. Once again, I'd like to now invite our panel speakers to the front. May I please invite to the next slide, if I can? Yeah, slide 2. So I'd like to make an introduction one by one. Mr. Elijah Ball, please correct me if I haven't said your last name incorrectly. So Deputy Chairman of 20 as well, please be seated. If I can have you a round of applause. The 2019 Queensland Local Hero of the Year and also Australia Award, and is currently Deputy Chairman of Ethnic Community Council of Queensland. We appreciate your time. Great to see you. And our next guest speaker, Miss Naree Willen. Thank you. And may I please a big round of applause. Thank you, Naree. She's an inspector of Queensland Police as well. May I please invite Mr. Samuel Huang, sorry. May I have a big round of applause for Samuel. He's a senior associate at TWC Lawyers who specialise in criminal law. So I've been told that I'm keep blocking the camera's angle, and this is being broadcasted live, I believe, through Facebook as well. So thank you for those who's watching through Facebook. And YouTube, YouTube it is. Again, once again, panelists, we appreciate your time being here. I believe each of you has had your own sort of viewpoints and thoughts that you've prepared. So if I may ask you, Elijah, to perhaps start with your background, and maybe perhaps if you give us a bit of introduction of your life story too, and share with us, with people here, about this experience, if I can.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and all the panelists. It's great to share the table with you, and hopefully we'll have a great evening. My name is Elijah Ball. So originally I was born in South Sudan, so as you can tell, I'm African, Australian. And I've been here for the last 19 years, and most of my work has been community engagement and also working with young people. And through that journey, I've seen a lot of racial vilifications, and hopefully our lawyers here and police officers will tell us more. But I think, when looking at the statistic for 2020, it is disturbing how much, vilification and hate crime has increased. And I think that's alarming for all of us. It's particularly those of us who always look different, that the society may not fit in the narrative. And I think that's one of the challenges. So we are here to create a conversation. And I think when we have conversation about issues, we can find a solution. And some of you possibly, last year I ran for an election. I was running for local council down in Logan. It was fun, but also there were a lot of racist comments, and which I still reflects at that time. But as you mentioned earlier, the society got a lot of good people, but we have few who are so damaging. And I think it's up to us to educate those people so we can minimize the damage. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Samuel, and I'm currently working as a Senior Associate of TWC Lawyers, and we specialise in criminal law. I defend many criminals and also victims when they make reports, and we try to obviously give a lot of advice surrounding criminal law, especially racism in the community. Although it's not frequent, I will say there are occasions where there are serious consequences and people get hurt emotionally and physically. And obviously it affects our community. It affects workers, it affects people who volunteer, it affects elderly and children. It happens in schools and many parts of the community, which we're here to talk about. I believe, and I'd just like to shed some light on people who do commit those criminal behaviours and what the court sees when they do sentence these people and trying to penalise these people for such behaviour. Out there are certain charges which I believe the police officers here today will explain more, but the obvious ones are assault on people and also willful damage against other people's property, such as houses. And also there's a federal charge called the use of carriage service. It's where you use a phone and you make racist comments to someone, you threaten their lives. And these kind of behaviours are all charged through the criminal code and the federal criminal avenues. Now, when the magistrate or the judge sentences these people for these kind of sorts of charges, they look at various factors. Some factors are obvious: the criminal's age, what kind of background they grew up in, and obviously the most important factor, I guess, is the objective factors in the criminal behaviour that they've committed. And when they look at the objective circumstances, racism is a very big part. There are a lot of leniencies that the judges and the magistrates have in trying to give a lesser sentence to people, because they want to give a person a second chance to rehabilitate from the offending and come back as a better community member. However, racism does cancel out those leniencies, which causes the magistrate and the judge to make a more harsher penalty against these people who commit offences in the name of racism, or just because that person is of a different background, and treat those people in a different way. The magistrates really take that seriously, and I've seen many instances in the courts where people are protected. They also give victims a lot of a lot of participation in these sentences. They give the opportunity for the victim to speak out loud. And I'd just like to note that people who hurt people, the starting point is imprisonment. And it's very serious in the courts, and a lot of the times people see suspended sentences, people who don't actually go to prison, and they get very angry about those outcomes, even though the police try their best to put forward the criminal behaviour in an evil way or in an objective way. The situation is that the courts have these leniencies, and in the face of racism, a lot of people do go to prison for these offences, and when they're very seriously hurt, especially, they see themselves go in for a long time. It's quite hard defending someone who's been racist, and I've seen that a lot in the courts. I do note that whilst those charges are there is no formal sort of aggravating factor that is noted in the law for racism. So that's something I think the Queensland government and Australia itself is working on to have that mentioned. But the precedent shows in the previous cases that racism is taken very seriously and is protected in the community. And I'm sure the police officers will mention this today, but there is a charge under the Anti-Discrimination Act 1991 of Queensland, and everyone is welcome here to access that law. It essentially is to prevent discrimination in the community based on race, based on sex, based on many other factors. There is, under Section 131A, there is a charge that the police can utilise in order to charge people who have threatened physical harm or incites others to use physical harm against a certain group of people, such as race, and the penalty is there, a 6 months imprisonment maximum or around $10,000 fine. Now, whilst there is this charge available to our community and everyone can utilise this charge, there are some barriers, including that the charge itself needs to be approved by the Department of Public Prosecutions. So what happens is, in Queensland, there's the police, and for the higher courts, the District Court and the Supreme Court, the DPP, the Department of Public Prosecutions, take over, and they work under the Attorney General, and they have to give permission to police to allow them to proceed with this charge. And so, and it's also a very low penalty. If you think about the 6 month maximum imprisonment sentence, the worst scenario in the world would receive a 6 month imprisonment. So anything under that, or if it falls in the middle, there's a high chance that they could even not receive a term of imprisonment. However, I believe the Queensland government is working on that law to strengthen those protections against discrimination against race. And I'd just like to also mention that there are some defences available to the community in these more threatening situations of assault or physical harm. And everyone would be aware that the most obvious types of defences available to the community when someone is trying to assault them, unlawfully assault them, is provocation is one of them. Although I am very careful when I do advise of this, because provocation is a very difficult defence. Some of the elements, for example, the wrongful act by the person must be likely to deprive an ordinary person of self-control, and it must induce an assault. It must be in the heat of the moment, and it must be also proportionate to the wrongful act. Now, these four elements are quite hard to prove in a realistic situation, and it doesn't mean if someone's coming to you and they're doing a wrongful act against you, it doesn't mean that this law is there to protect you. However, if you're in a situation, heat of the moment, someone has wronged you in a very provocative way, it's likely to deprive an ordinary person of their self-control, then this defence will activate. I will note that I have also advised many people and seen this in the courts. It's not an easy defence to prove. Normally people are required to walk away from a very threatening situation, I'd just like to put it out there so that the community does know, however, that there are these defences available. There's also the defence of self-defence, and I'm sure everyone is aware that if someone is unlawfully assaulting you, whether verbally or physically, then you are able to use force reasonably necessary to effect a defence. The force that you use must be unlikely to cause death or grievous bodily harm. Grievous bodily harm is when you've hurt someone permanently, to put it in simple terms. But that defence is also available. That is a more common defence. People in a situation where they're being assaulted physically, and you need to defend yourself by using some force on the other person. Of course, that is accepted by the courts, and the courts, when they look at these defences, they really look into the person and what kind of situation they're in, what kind of circumstance they were in. I do also note for my last, and I'm sure this overlaps with the police as well, but there's also the victim compensation scheme in Australia where you're able to, if you're a victim of a crime and you've reported it to police and you've been hurt, you're able to make an application to the government saying that for medical expenses, and we help with those kind of applications as well, and you're able to be compensated for all medical expenses. And that concludes what I wish to share. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I think Samuel's a lot of information about the, yes.
Is there a question section? Or?
There will be Q&A section just after the remarks, if I can, yes. If I may, have you...
Thank you. Sam's covered nearly all of my dot points that I have here tonight. So, from a Queensland Police Service perspective, vilification is very concerning for us. We are aware from community reporting that during COVID that there was an increase within the community. We didn't necessarily see that reporting to police. And as Sam actually mentioned, under the Anti-Discrimination Act, and we've got some brochures here tonight to hand out, so there's unlawful vilification, which is a civil matter, or there is serious vilification, which is what Sam was talking about, which you can report to police, and we do encourage members of the community to report that to police. Our ability as a law enforcement agency and other law enforcement agencies to monitor it, which is why is very difficult if we don't have members reporting it. So even even if it's just the unlawful vilification, you can report that through to the Queensland Human Rights Commission. And we do encourage people to do that, because without those reports, we don't get a true picture of what's really going on within our called communities. And also with the serious vilification, we do encourage members to report that to police as well, so we can investigate those crimes. That it is a criminal offence. As Sam mentioned, it has a 6-month jail sentence of 6 months or a fine of over $9,000. But once again, we do need the evidence to proceed with that offence, and we do need Department of Public Prosecution's authority before we proceed. So of course we're always looking for sufficiency of evidence. If people are to report serious vilification, there's a number of things or ways that you can assist us when you report that to police, and that's by being able to provide CCTV, perhaps photographs, recordings of telephone conversations, and police will walk you through, or will walk our community members through the process should they come to a station or phone police for us to attend your house to report serious vilification.
Thank you. If I may have a round of applause as well for sharing your thoughts and information. I think it's imperative that from both, I guess, a professional level and also the community level and the government level, to support any of those people who may have been impacted. I think it is crucial that we all kind of work together and not to silence ourselves, because I think our sort of Asian culture often is actually keeping the silence and resolving the matter. So if there are anyone hearing through the YouTube or in this group who may wish to discuss these matters, please do so afterwards as well, and including the Q&A that we'll do short after. I did note that there was a question on the from the crowd that you may wish to ask. Perhaps if you'd like to ask that question, feel free to do that.
Should I stand up?
Absolutely, please. Yes.
I'm just wondering that when someone attacked me, normally I would be like he attacked me like with abusing words or something, like with physically. Then nobody can try to control their emotion. Nobody can control, That's why you said like we need the proper action to defend ourselves. But I'm wondering that what is the proper action to defend ourselves? Like if I attack someone who attacked me, like if he got a scar because of my attack or bruise, if he got it, like I should not do this action, or I should just defend myself. I'm just wondering what is the proper defense.
Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'm sure a lot of people have been in your situation, and it's terrible. I will note that the best situation, obviously, is to walk away and report it to police straight away. It's hard when the person is coming up to you and confronting you and restricting your ability to escape from the situation. That's why these defences are there for you. Self-defence, to effect your defence, you can use any force reasonable to effect that defence. So essentially, these defences are there to protect you from any criminal responsibility. If it's a situation where that person is vilifying you and using physical violence, it's best to try and record that or in any way try and get witnesses involved. And I'm sure Nari can answer the more better situations.
Yeah.
But
so we would encourage people to try and de-escalate the situation, and it's very easy to sit here and say that to people until you're actually, in that situation. But we would encourage people to try and de-escalate and get themselves to safety.
And normally the situation is that if that was the case, and you were the one, and before you were even charged, the police will hear your side of the story. And normally they are very good to work with, and they do help victims. If the situation is that you were the victim, and however that person has came and reported you first, then they will definitely hear your side of the story before charging anyone. And we're there to also try and prove your story. And if there's a circumstance of self-defense or provocation, it's something that the courts will have to make a decision on, but I believe that the system works and justice can be served.
And I think to add on, there's all those factors that protect you in the law, and with my understanding is that safety is very important. Of course, if there's a way you can reasonably get out of that situation, but again, under the law, there's self-defense, and which you can use as a defense as well in case you can't escape out of that, because I also did law. And I think that's where we need to understand what the law say, and you can apply reasonably force in case, because for example, if someone attack you and you knock them down, you don't need to repeatedly knocking them down. That will give you the opportunity to escape. That's the reasonable step that you have taken. If you don't need to repeatedly punching them to death. That again will be a different scenario. So use a reasonable force if you can minimize to escape within that situation. But I think there's a lot of loophole in our racial discrimination law, and I think the Queensland Parliament is working on it. And possibly we can actually make those laws criminally strong, so that thing like that can be minimized. Not only just physical, but also bubble, all those online posting and all those things, because those things emotionally affect a lot of people.
And what Elijah just said about the Legal Affairs and Community Safety Committee, the inquiry into serious vilification and hate crimes, is there a number, so it went out for submissions, for a lot of agencies submitted, and you can actually get agencies, their submissions to that inquiry online. I know the Queensland Police Service, we put in a submission, the Queensland Human Rights Commission put in a submission, and you can get those if you Google, just because the government is looking at strengthening the vilification laws, which would assist all of us, would assist police, would assist the community, and as Sam has already mentioned, is that there is, and as I've already mentioned, there is that offence of serious vilification. However, from 2015 to 2020, the Queensland Police only had 8 offences reported under that legislation. Because we need a certain type of evidence to prove, so we need sufficient evidence to prove that offence. Other times we will prefer other offences like Sam's already mentioned, which might be assault, willful damage, public nuisance and those type of offences, which may also show why there hasn't been a lot of offences under that actual Anti-Discrimination Act.
I think for me also, personally, just recently actually, I was at a Fortitude Valley area and just walking past after dinner, and and those sort of, I guess we call it, I guess, a hit and run type of, from the back, someone knocked down an Asian lady who was attending a venue. She was literally doing nothing but just walking past. But fortunately for her, she has reported to the police, I believe, and nearby venues, which is all very multicultural business owners, were extremely helpful to share the video and footages of the street. So I haven't followed up, but I did hear about that. And personally for me as well, along the years, and I can't say actually now that we're talking about it, I've also personally experienced some of these assaults in the past when I was younger, because I grew up in Surfers Paradise in Gold Coast, and certainly it's an interesting area to roam around in an evening time for me as a young person. But at the time, I just thought that this is just one of those things that just naturally happens, and I just accepted the fact that it is what it is in Australia. But I think we're much better than that here, to be honest. And I think, we as a multicultural society, this is literally the most multicultural, I believe, and one of the largest multicultural society that exists in the world. And I think, it's great to see the Queensland government as well and the community is doing a lot to support legislations and other opportunities. So thank you for sharing that insight, and I hope that answered some of that question for you. And if I can perhaps ask anyone on the floor to
한국말로 먼저.
네, 제가 드리겠습니다.
혹시 코로나 사태 이후에 특히 그런 혐오 범죄나 아시안 헤이트 크라임이 더 늘어났다고 생각을 레이시즘이 더 늘어났다고 생각하시는지, do you believe there was too much hype regarding Asian hate crimes and Asian racism, especially after the COVID situation?
Has there been an increase in some cases, or is there more awareness that brought in those cases post-COVID, as we talked about before?
It's very hard to answer that when you said, is there too much hype? Because it's an opinion-based question. Like I said, from a QPS perspective, is that through community reporting and chatter, is that there was an increase when COVID hit in relation to vilification. Was that necessarily reported? No. Because it may not have hit for us that serious vilification where it's a criminal offence, but it may have been unlawful vilification, and that's where we would encourage people to report that through to the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, and I think for me, from our perspective as a big body for all colour communities in Queensland, we have to say that there's a big increase in terms of racial vilification on Asian, particularly when the COVID-19 hit. It just raised the vibe of racial vilification. Although there's no lot of report that has gone to the police, the police data, in 2020, 2019 was 144 that was reported as racial vilification. Then 2020, it was 158 cases reported as racial. So that shows it has increased from the police data. And I think that's really a concerning thing, because one of the things, the trends that always emerge in Australia, when an incident happens overseas and filter into Australia, it affects that particular group. If it happened in China, Chinese are the one, importing COVID-19 and all those sort of. I think these are the narrative we need to look at how we address them. But I think it comes back again to the leadership, and it was great that when that COVID-19 happened, the Premier, the police, the federal government rally up and support the Chinese community. But I would say yes, there is that increase. Same with African, when something happened, it brand them as, gangs or something of that kind, and you all seen it. So I think there's that growing tendency against, and it's a fear, it's all about ignorance. And I will give you a simple example. In the community where I live, in the area where I live, we got a neighborhood Facebook, and one lady just wake up in the middle of night and post something and say, hey, you people be careful, there was one African looking and Chinese looking young person going around and they seem to be, checking people's houses and want to steal. And I was very offended. So I stood up in the forum, it got over 30,000 people, and I said, how do we justify that they were Chinese? How do we justify that they were Africans? And what makes you assume that they were criminals? They were going to steal. And there were these people who backed me up, but there were these people who think that, there's too much political correctness. But what it matters is, how does that affect those people who are you trying to brand as criminal? And I think that's something that I think if this law is going to pass, and I put in my submission to the inquiry, and I think we need to make sure criminalize those assumptions so that people actually deter and make people think before they say something against certain racial groups.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually do have a question, and this is actually, I don't know whether it might be quite common, but from being an Australian Asian background, one of the things that if we were to be assaulted, for example, or abused in a different way, I think for a lot of people, it's very hard we feel very difficult to approach police because it daunts us, it scares us, and also, the numbers that we normally call, it is not, unless it's a really serious incident, 000 would not work on those instances because you need to report to local beats. When you get there, there's always that process involved at the beginning, and that step seems to be the hardest one to make, and to appeal the case in whichever way. As an insider within the government, the police department, what would be the right way to approach the police if this event happens? First, because instantly it's that moment when it happens to you, and you're already either been beaten or hurt. Your mind is actually not there. You just, and you also feel the anger and all that. If you can perhaps share with us what would be the best ways to approach police on that instant, that would be much appreciated.
So if it's going on right now and it's an emergency, 000. We always encourage 000. Apart from that, it's our police link, which is 131 444, or you can attend a police station. Some offences you can report online, but obviously when it's assault matters, it would be an emergency if it's occurring right now and it's an emergency, or police link. We are very lucky in South Brisbane District, and a lot of our districts is that we have police liaison officers, and we have the most amount actually in our district. We have 16, we're going up to 19 police liaison officers who can assist, and we can make, if it's not an emergency and police crews aren't required straight away, we can make people can make an appointment so that we can ensure a police liaison officer is present. Or we use professional interpreting services as well. So our police liaison officers are not allowed to do professional interpreting during interviews or for witness statements, but obviously they can be present when somebody comes in to report, and that's just to do that engagement and to make people feel safe and comfortable.
I'd just like to also add on to Nari, and if that happens, a lot of people call these law firms as well and say, how can I make this faster or something like that. But in my experience, police do act on it as soon as possible. In the meantime, you can always try and gather evidence, go to the doctor, document your injuries, or try and get CCTV. Obviously the police do that, but if your friends saw it, make sure you have their numbers, or if there was a witness at the scene, make sure you get their numbers and really try and build your case, because whilst it is the police are there to always help you, but you need to help yourself at times. And I just think that whilst the police try and do everything they could, there's some things that are difficult sometimes, and things fall through the cracks, and a lot of the times that can be helped by the person themselves. And if you help yourself, I think it makes the best situation as well.
Evidence approach. Yeah. Thank you for sharing about that as well. Yes, please.
Yeah, if a citizen makes a complaint or reports a crime, a racist type crime, what are the next steps that are taken by the police, and is there any sort of feedback system that the individual can expect?
Okay, so if it's serious vilification, which does fall under the police umbrella, and we'll take the report of the person, so we call that person the complainant, and it will just be like any other criminal matter where we'll take all the details. The time frame in relation to how long that may take to investigate is really dependent on the complexity of the matter and what evidence needs to be obtained, how many witnesses there are. We may need to get witness statements, we may need to get telephone recordings and use other sorts of devices to get evidence. And during that process, the complainant should be kept up to date all the time by the investigating officer. And so we would phone the complainant to keep them up to date. These matters aren't always a quick matter, so it's not that you might make a complaint tonight and we will solve it by tomorrow. It might be different if you were talking about an assault, but vilification isn't always a physical assault, remember. So there's other, like we said, it could be people sending out letters, putting things online about people spray painting, even wearing outfits and those types of things. So I think we need to think more than just assaults, but yeah, it's really difficult for me to give an actual timeline as to how long it may take. But to take a report would be probably half an hour, perhaps, depending on the complexity of the matter.
And you can always follow up with the reporting officer using your QP number. You can call Police Link and say your QP number, and they can send an email to the reporting officer to get back to you with the updates of the case. And that's sometimes how you get the updates of your of your case as well.
I guess one of the challenges, and from the community perspective, is the time it takes to justify that it is vilification. And that's where a lot of people don't report it, because it takes a lot of time. Someone's going to make this statement to justify, even if you are a public person who report that, the person who is aggrieved also need to be part of that. And that sometimes take a lot of time to justify and maybe turn that to legal. So, and that's where a lot of communities always frustrated to report those things, that, incident that they have seen. But I guess what is important about reporting is that it improved the system, and it informed the system about the trends, the imaging, and all that. So I think we may not get the feedback as we hope to, but I think it's good to continue reporting those, because that will inform the police, but also it will inform the system, and hopefully the loud voice will appear within that system and change something.
And I might just add with that, if you do report serious vilification to police, we don't automatically have the right to go and tell the Queensland Human Rights Commission about that, so we will need your permission to be able to report that across to Queensland Human Rights Commission. So then there's double. So we're reporting their criminal offence, but Human Rights Commission also have that information as well, so that they're aware of what that big picture of what's really happening in the community.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, please, Pastor.
통역을 좀 해주세요.
네, 알겠습니다.
저는 김용성 목사라고 하고요. 프리즘 오월로 상담을 하고 있습니다. 2년 전에 어느 한국 여자 청년이 식당에서 친구들과 밥을 먹고 나와서 길을 걷다가 계란에 맞았어요. 날계란에. 상황이 어떻게 되냐면 차 한 대가 빠르게 지나가면서 창문에서 창문을 열고 계란을 누가 던지고 그걸 맞고 눈이 부었습니다. 그리고 그 차는 이제 영어로 욕을 하면서 이제 그냥 지나갔고요. 그래서 그 즉시 그 청년들은 경찰서에 가서 리포트를 하고 어떻게 좀 상황이 진행되는지를 기다리고 있었는데 물론 이제 치료비 정도는 이렇게 지원을 받아서 병원에 가서 치료를 받았어요. 그런데 그 이후로는 그 사건에 대해서 전혀 진행이 되는 어떻게 되는지의 리포트를 제가 받은 적이 없었습니다. 그 사건 이후에도 그렇지만 제가 생각할 때는 한국 청년들이나 한국 사람들이 대부분 여기 호주 경찰들을 공권력이 세니까 믿지만 그런 범죄 대상이 되어서 대응을 할 때 뭐 셀프 디펜스를 해도 좋겠지만 신고를 하면 거기에 대한 분명한 사건 처리와 진행 과정들이 잘 진행되는지에 대한 불신이 있어요 지금. 예. 많이 그것들 경험을 하셨고 그래서 그 불신한 부분에 그래서 제가 걱정하는 부분은 의식이 먼저 좀 바뀌어야 되지 않나. 그러면 바뀌려면 경찰이나 어떤 그런 범죄에 대한 어떤 교민들이나 사는 사람 하시는 분들이 거기에 대해서 안전함을 가지고 그런 불안감을 덜 가지고 지낼 수 있도록 뭔가 정부나 경찰 쪽에서는 법적에서도 그렇고 어떻게 해서 이것을 잘 대응할 수 있도록 분명한 제시를 교민들에게 좀 해줘야 되지 않겠나라는 생각이 듭니다. 왜냐하면 그런 의식이 바뀌지 않고서는 아무리 뭐 영영영을 누르고 신고를 한다 해도 그거에 대해서는 분명한 사건 처리나 처우 사례들을 이렇게 깔끔하게 됐다는 얘기는 저는 들어본 적이 별로 없어서 그래서 좀 어떻게 그거에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
네, 제가 it was a very hard one to translate, but I'll do my best to pass on the message. He didn't breathe in between him speaking. The pastor currently serves as the consultant for work and holiday people of South Korea. Currently, he had a case maybe a couple of years ago where a few young girls was walking by and the car drives past and eggs are thrown and obviously sworn as well, obviously quite offensively. They felt very victimized of that. Therefore, they have gone to police and reported that incident to the police. Unfortunately for them, there wasn't much follow-up that happened and they waited a very long time to bring justice into action. And however, they couldn't receive much support from police with that incident because perhaps it was considered a little bit minimal of that impact. I think in general there is a bit of a mistrust in the community of a potential resolution that could be offered by the police, and that also stops from victims to approach police at times. So there was a commentary from the pastor just that what he observed in the last, I think 7 years he served as 6 or 7 years served as a consultant for work and holiday, that he can just talk and help them out. So one of the questions I guess he was asking was, what can we do to make this feel better for I guess to regain that trust in police, and I guess at the same time, how should we guide those young people who has that mistrust in the system to do the right thing?
Firstly, I apologise on behalf of the QPS if it took that long for those young victims to be communicated with. I appreciate that it's very difficult to understand criminal justice system, and it does take some time for matters to go to court, if not sure if the matter did go to court, is that police should keep up to date with victims or complainants. And that's, I suppose, where our police liaison officers can help out, or we can just encourage our community that police are doing the right thing. They have many investigations at once as well. They don't just have one investigation going on at any time. Is that we are there to support them, and that we will continue to support them. And I suppose the Q prime number, which is the number that what Jung said was talking about before, is that when somebody makes a complaint to police, they'll be given a number It's usually, it will start with a QP, and that's the number for victims or complainants to follow up on their matters. And that's the best way to do that, is to phone through to the investigating officer or send the investigating officer an email. And if you're not satisfied with that, you can send an email to their officer in charge of the station.
그런 분들한테는 이제 가끔씩 이제 직접적인 이메일을 통해서 추가적인 폴로업이 아무래도 추천을 해드린다고 말씀해 주신 것 같습니다. 그리고 그 위에 있는 관련된 부처라든지 거기에 대해서도 폴로업 해줄 수 있으시면 거기에 대한 답변이 조금 더 나오지 않을까라는 생각이 든다라고 솔직하게 말씀해 주셨습니다.
이 부분에 대해서는 제가 조금 더 설명을 드리고 싶은 부분, 일단은 인스펙터님께서 말씀하셨던 부분 중에서 그렇게 오래 걸렸다는 부분에 대해서 일단 개인적으로 사과하신 부분이 있고요. 그다음에 형사법 체계라는 게 사실 한국과 호주와 여러 가지 다른 점이 있기 때문에 한국에서 오래 거주하시던 분들이 호주에서 오셨을 때 어려움을 겪으시는 부분들이기도 하세요. 그래서 이제 그런 사건이 발생했을 때 경찰에 도움을 요청하고 그 한국에서의 어떤 그런 경찰이 가지고 있는 시스템이 어떻게 돌아가는지에 대한 그런 부분에 대한 이해를 가지고 호주에 오셨다가 그런 부분이 이제 생각과 다르게 돌아가시는 경우가 아마 많으실 거라고 생각을 해요. 그래서 이제 그 사건이 진행이 안 됐다라고 하는 부분은 저희가 몇 가지를 생각해 볼 수가 있을 것 같은데, 첫 번째는 아까 말씀드린 QP 넘버가 발급이 안 됐을 경우가 있을 수 있고요. QP 넘버라고 하는 건 이제 저희가 이제 공식적으로 발급하는 사건 번호인데요. 그래서 QP로 시작하는 그 어떤 일련 번호인데, 그게 있으면 이제 경찰에서 공식적으로 그 사건을 인지하고 수사를 하고 있다는 증거가 될 수 있어요. 근데 만약에 그 QP 넘버가 발급이 되지 않았다면 네, 이제 가끔 이제 다른 경우에서 이제 한국 분들이 어떤 경우를 겪으시냐면 그 현장에서 경찰관이랑 얘기를 했다고 사건이 신고가 됐다고 생각하시는 경우가 있는데, 그게 아니라 공식적으로 사건에 대한 신고를 진행해 주셔야 QP 넘버가 발급이 되는데 그런 부분 없이 단지 그 현장에서 경찰관과 얘기했는데 왜 사건이 진행이 안 되냐라고 여쭤보시는 경우가 있을 수 있어요. 그래서 그런 부분도 있을 수 있고, 그다음 그 QP 넘버가 발급이 되셨다면 아까 일전에 제가 말씀드린 폴리스 링크나 어떤 그런 부분을 통해서 사건의 업데이트를 받아보실 수가 있고요. 이게 아무래도 물론 언어나 문화적인 부분 때문에 그 경찰관분이랑 직접적으로 연락하는 게 어려우실 수가 있어요. 이제 그럴 때 또 한국인 경찰분들도 계시고 이제 저도 있고 하기 때문에 저나 다른 한국인 경찰분을 통해서 그런 부분을 문의를 해주시면 좋으실 것 같고요. 그 다음에 이제 그 또 인스펙터님께서 말씀하신 게, 만약에 그 사건이 진행되는 과정이나 아니면 또는 결과가 마음에 드시지 않으실 수가 있어요. 본인이 생각하시기에. 그럴 경우에는 어떻게 하시면 되냐면, 그 상급자의 어떤 그 오피서의 인차지라고 하는데, 저희가 그 담당하는 경찰관의 상급자에게 이메일이나 편지를 보내셔서 그 뭐 선생님이나 본인께서 어떤 가지고 계신 걱정거리나 아니면 불만 사항을 적어주시면 거기에 대한 공식적인 답변을 저희가 드리도록 되어 있어요. 그래서 그런 몇 가지 방법들이 있기 때문에 이제 저희 쪽에서도 최대한 그 한국 분들이나 아니면 다른 다문화 그런 백그라운드를 가지신 분들이랑 여러 가지로 얘기를 나누려고 하는 부분들이 조금이라도 더 쉽게 경찰에 접근을 하시고 또 도움을 받으실 수 있게 하는 부분이라서 이제 만약에 그런 일이 발생하시면 언제든지 저희와 얘기를 해주시고요. 저희도 언제든지 그런 부분에서는 도와드릴 용의가 있습니다.
Lastly,
저도 이제 좀 현실적인 대답을 해드리고 싶은데요. 사실 그런 상황에서 만약에 경찰한테 신고를 하고 어떤 조치를 원하시면 그분 자체도 이제 좀 증거물을 압수를 해서 좀 만약에 그 차량 번호나 뭐 그런 이제 도움을 준다면 훨씬 더 빨리 진행이 되더라고요, 사건이. 근데 그렇지 못한 경우가 많죠. 사실 좀 피해자로서 그게 얼마나 억울하고 그런 건 저도 많이 들었습니다. 그래서 그런 상황들은 너무 억울하고 사실 경찰도 할 수 있는 게 많이 뭐 없을 수도 있다고 뭐 생각이 드는데 그냥 너무 아쉽습니다. 저도 이제 그런 상황. 근데 만약에 좀 생각을 해서 뭐 그 상황에 아무리 당했어도 내가 좀 잡아야겠다 해서 혼자서 그 차량 번호를 받거나 뭐 이렇게 해서 좀 도움을 준다면 조금 더 빠른 조치가 있지 않을까. If you want.
Yes. I don't think I
Should
can.
you want me to?
What I think Sam, maybe perhaps you can quickly summarize it.
Yeah. So I just mentioned that, for example, in those situations, if there's a car going past, throws an egg at you, the best thing you can do is look at the car number plate, write it down, and then report it to police. Because police sometimes, and I totally understand, sometimes there are situations where there's not enough evidence to follow up a case, to finish investigations, and it just lies and they call us and we can't do anything about it as well. There's just not enough evidence to catch that person, and it's just, it's very terrible, but it's just the reality of the situation.
It's
Yeah,
very true.
I will
Yes.
give you an example. It happened to me twice. So someone threw eggs at me, and so one was just walking my foot. So what I did, it was the time when that G3 mobile phone came up first, and I had the camera on. I took the photo of the person, and I went to police station. And then the other one was a car, so I took the number plate of the person, cram it and make sure wrote it down. And what happened in that incident, police actually went and, because of the number plate, they were able to be identified. And they went and give them warning, and they asked me as well, do you want us to put criminal charges on him? And I said, look, so long as he got the message, he will learn from it. So I think as much as we can get the evidence, but I think it doesn't stop you from talking about it, because I think as a community, we need to voice our concern. We need to put the impact those concerns or those issues are causing on us. And if it is affecting, those girls, it would be good also then to go to your local MP and say, hey, this has become frequent. How do we respond to it? And some of them will take courage to raise that in Parliament and perhaps improve some of the law that are meant to prevent those things. And I think one of the challenges with the current law as it stands, 6 months is nothing, or $9,223,000, whatever, $23 is nothing to really deter people. Because at the end of the day, it may not be recorded in the criminal history. So I think the charge and the level need to be increased a little bit, and that's something I've been advocating for, to make sure there's higher penalty to allow those people to really be deterred, but also get the consequences of their action.
That's a really good point, Elijah. I think as these events occur continuously going forward, not just these events occur, I think it's very important that you do speak to your local representative in a government level, because I think the main thing is to raise that voice to say that we are experiencing a discomfort in a different way. I think that is extremely crucial, and I think you've nailed that pretty well. So
it's about reporting early, responding early, and for us to change behaviours. Because if people don't report things and then talk about it 3 years later, we haven't changed any behaviours of the offenders, of the people committing these offences. So that's where it's really important to report early, so we can respond early, or the community can respond early, and then we try and change behaviours. And it's small. I think it's really small steps as well. I don't think we will change things overnight. We're all aware of that, but I think it takes all of us to help change.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you once again for your valuable insight.
Someone's question.
Yes, yes.
Someone give him a candy.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Second. Yeah. I think we've got time.
심각한 점인데, 제가 나이가 연신이 65살이 됐습니다. 버스를 타고 이제 다른 시기에서 버스를 타가지고 시내 갔어요. 가다가 백서센터로 갔어요. 갔는데 다른 시기에서 탄 친구가 바이킹 게임 비슷하게 돼가지고 정치가 이런 놈이 짐을 풀팅하면서 올라와가지고 버스 운전사가 있는데 그것도 무시하고 타가지고 제 앞에 앉았단 말입니다. 그래가지고 직감을 보고 이거는 내가 피해야 말고 뒤로 나갔는데 버스 좌석이 다 찬 거예요. 그래가지고 이거 안 되겠구나. 그냥 가만히 있었어야 되겠구나. 근데 이걸 직감적으로 딱 느꼈어요. 칼트롤 센터 거기 왔을 때 이게 딱 이렇게 돌아서더니 왜 자꾸 쳐다보냐. 사람이 눈이 있으면 쳐다볼 거 아닙니까. 그건 자동적으로 하면서 시비를 걸면서 욕을 막 하면서 치려고 그러더라고요. 그래서 감옥이 서울 배웠으니까 백업백업 하면서 고웨이 그 얘기를 하면서 이제 가져가지고 그 종점화까지 내렸어요. 퀸스트리트에 내려가지고 이제 버스 운전사한테 얘기를 했어요. 이런 얘기니까. 근데 버스 운전사도 겁을 먹었는지 얘기를 못 한다고 이러더라고요. 그래서 레코딩이 거기 안에 있거든요. 그 안에 CCTV가 내장이 있으니까 난 이미 이걸 인지하고 나가지고 이제 퀸스트리트 그 폴리스 스테이션으로 갔어요. 가가지고 거기서 내 그 개인 얘기 다 하고 이런 후원문 나가고 그런 치려고 내가 물리적으로 하려고 했는데 백업까지 다 했다. 그래 했더니 거기서 그 큐티 나무를 제가 받았어요. 그래가지고 했는데 5인중 4주를 기다렸는데 아무 소식이 없더라고요. 그래서 내가 하다못해가지고 갔어요 거기. 퀸스랜드주 그 브리스베이션에 가서 어떻게 된 거냐 그랬더니 자기네들은 그 비디오랑 그 버스에 내장된 걸 나왔는데 별 혐의점이 없어가지고 우연히 처리됐다. 그러면서 그냥 딱 하더라고요. 이거는 내가 봤을 땐 사건을 뭉개는 그리고 내 그 개인 휴먼마에서 완전히 무시하는 거예요. 말하자면. 어떻게 이런 호주에서 이런 일이 일어날 수가 있어요. 이게 한두 번도 아니에요. 저는 내 직장으로 갈 때 저는 지금 과거 그 공무원을 할 때 이나라로 가는데 그 안에다가 물도 아니다 살짝 일어난다 거기다 물 던져놓으면 바나나 그 다음에 오물 덩어리 있지 않습니까? 그게 갑자기 확 날아오더라고요. 그래서 제가 차 같은 사고 날 뻔했어요. 그러면 써니뱅크에서는 달걀을 차에다 던져가지고 해가지고 맞고 한 방은 또 제가 맞았어요. 그래서 에이 그래 사람을 하려고 하면 이런 일도 저런 일이 있었구나 연결해서 있는데 지금 내가 이거 쭉 보니까 한 7번 정도 이런 유사 케이스가 있는데 이건 제가 봐가지고 이거 완전 호로 자식들도 아니고 굉장히 기분이 아주 좋지 않습니다. 이게 임나가지고 지금 24년 동안 여기서 하는데 이게 확률적으로 따져봤을 때 3년마다 한 번씩 이런 개 같은 일이 일어나니까 참 네, 저는 너무 여기는 진짜 이게 지금 뭐 하다못해 여기 정치 권력 있는 사람이 있으면 이런 일이 일어나겠어요. 그걸 수사하는 것도 뭉개버려요. 말도 안 되는 거기로 있거든요. 나는 녹음까지 다 돼 있어요. 저 압니다. 그리고 거기서 그 그놈이 하던 그 이렇게 해가지고 공격하려는 자세부터 녹화가 다 돼 있어요. 그게 어떻게 각하가 돼가지고 기각이 되는 수가 있어요. 이거는 그런 문제가 많아요.
좋은 말씀해 주셔서 감사드립니다. Thank you. Thank you for speaking. I think perhaps you could also assist him afterwards. But just to quickly summarize, he has experienced through multiple occasions, I think up to 7 times, in terms of being waste thrown and eggs as well. And various times there was one incident where he has experienced a bit of violence and felt threatened in the bus. And been sworn at, and he has gone to Queen Street Police Station to report. But after a while, they come back to him and said there was not enough evidence. There was TV recording for the bus, however, they found not much of guilt in there to prosecute to the next step. So he's just been expressing his, I guess, personal experience for the last 7 years as well. So he just wanted to sort of, I guess, raise his voice to make a comment. He's been living here for 24 years, and I think that was a really good point that he has raised, that has happened to everyone, in fact, many times. Perhaps I think if you can do some follow-up for the gentleman who has raised that question afterwards, I think that would be great. 저희가 지금 다가를 하면서 얘기할 수 있는 시간이 있기 때문에 아직 you're not going home yet. There is a bit of a meal and food prep, and they're here to obviously listen, support, provide comments where they can, and assist with the process. If you have anything you want to raise on your personal circumstances, or just want to express your viewpoints, they will be here to help you as well. And we do have a Korean liaison officer here, fortunately for us, who can assist with any of these inquiries. So perhaps we can leave that there to respond afterward individually, if I may. But can we please put the hand together for the panelists who've just spent incredible amount of time on this topic. You may be sitting back, and they will be here for a while. Okay, time has gone by very quickly, and I did want to, and it's actually really good that we have a lot of voices here from different experience and different backgrounds. I think that's extremely rare to have that, and I appreciate everyone who made their time obviously to come here to raise those concerns. I think the fact that we had representatives from different levels of a community really is a valuable insight, and we also have Emily here as well, who's part of our office in Stretton, also, right? Yes, who's also could raise some of that concerns and voice of what she heard today. I'm sure she'll share with her colleagues and so forth to provide a better outcome. But to keep things a little bit, I guess, a bit more lightly as well, in a sense, I'd like to also share a good news that happened to Korean society in general, I think also for Asian society. There is now soon to have a Brisbane consulate for South Korean consulate to be in Brisbane and Queensland, to be in presence as well. 지금 조만간 이제 호주 브리즈번에 있는 영사관이 개설이 되기 때문에 조만간 이제 영사관 관련된 출장소라든지 그런 government 레벨에 대한 서포트도 있을 예정입니다. Also, we've got some food prepared so we can just have a chat. It is a dark topic, but at the same, and I know we've all experienced this, but I think the important thing is we talk about it. I think that is the main thing. So that's the purpose of today. Let's keep things light. We all have a great life to live in Australia. Let's enjoy some food. I think in about 3-4 minutes time there will be some food served. Lastly, there is a couple of announcements from a Korean society, Queensland level if I may, and also some fun things. We've looked at some interesting videos from BTS, but there is also a Korean movie festival that's coming into Brisbane. There'll be some tickets given away to everyone. So there is a little gift that we prepared for everyone. Includes choco pie, which is the #1 Korean snack that everyone can't get enough of, and some tickets for the movie theatre for the festival. So please do collect the gift bags before you finish. Did I miss anything, President? Yes, and this year remarks 60 years between bilateral relationship ceremonial between South Korea and also Australia. So it's actually quite a monumental year for a lot of South Koreans who lives in Australia. So we do believe there is, we are planning an event on the Eka Day in celebration of that 60-year bilateral relationship. So please follow us on Facebook. We plan to do more of these as much as possible to raise voice, but there will be some good events happening towards the Eka Day. So if you can keep us close, that'll be great. I think that's about it. We've got some teas and coffees ready there for you. If I may just get the secretary to provide this to our guest speakers. And the rest here, please come and collect. I'll be standing here. One of our staff members will be stepping here to provide you with one. Can we give another big round of applause for the guest speakers and panels, if I may, for finish this off? Thank you. And do feel free to reach out and have a chat. Still stay back, and we'll enjoy to have a discussion. Thank you, everyone. 어떤 비디오? 이거 보고 왔습니다. 안녕하세요. 유튜브 보고 계신 시청자 여러분, 함께 해주셔서 너무 감사드리고, 저희가 각 정보라든지 이런 것들을 페이스북이나 유튜브를 통해서 올릴 테니까 함께 저희 페이스북 한인의 페이지를 확인해 주시면 좋겠습니다. Thank you everyone for those who's watching on through our YouTube channel. I hope the session was informative today, and we look forward to continuing providing good information. If there's any questions you want to ask, please email us or the Korean police officer, liaison officer directly. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, yes, of course.
제가 이제 이번이 마지막 그 공식 행사고요. 그다음에 이제 다다음 주부터는 옥슬리의 다른 그 직렬로 가게 돼서 그래서 이제 내년쯤 되면은 아마 포지션이 다시 어베일러블 될 거예요. 네, 그래서 이제 다른 분들도 혹시 그 이제 관심 있으시면 어플라이 하시라고 말씀을 드리려고 하는데 어딜 보고 얘기해야 되나요?
요거 보고 했었죠. So to translate, I think what the Korean, the Jung-hoon Bae has now, will be moving on to a different role next year. If there's any interest out there who wants to take he's too handsome to replace his position. I don't think we can ever get better one than him. But if there's anyone out there who would like to apply for the role to support for the community, please do so as well. And thank you both of you for your presence as well. Thank you. Bye bye everyone.